Days, the WNBA players are going to decide if they want to go on strike, and if they decide to go on strike, apparently that could be the end of the WNBA. The WNBA cannot come back from this.
So people thought Angel Reese was insane last year when she said, yeah, CBA's coming up, we deserve more, because I'm here, and if y'all don't give us what we want, we sitting out. What are you, crazy? Sit out and crush all the momentum from Caitlin Clark? Well, guess what? Just this week, W players voted yes on a strike. Not on strike.
Wow.
The urgency of the situation becomes impossible to ignore once you understand what's actually at stake. In a matter of days, this league won't be dealing with a symbolic disagreement or a temporary show of unity. This isn't about statements, protests, or performative gestures. What they're facing is the nuclear option of full-scale work stoppage, and not the kind that pauses things briefly before everyone returns to business as usual. This is the kind that freezes momentum entirely, the kind that erases forward progress overnight. The kind that doesn't just disappoint fans, but permanently fractures trust. History is brutally clear on this point. Leagues don't walk away from moments like this unscathed. The damage wouldn't stop internally. A shutdown doesn't happen in isolation. Every competitor with even a halfway decent business plan would immediately see opportunity. Attention doesn't wait. Fans don't sit idle. Media doesn't pause. The second the league steps away, someone else steps in. And once that door opens, it never fully closes again. That's what makes this choice so dangerous. It's not just about leverage. It's about survival. Forward momentum is one of the rarest and most fragile things in sports. Lose it at the wrong moment, and no amount of branding or nostalgia can bring it back. What's especially striking is how calmly this possibility is being discussed internally. There's no panic, no scrambling, just quiet acceptance that this is where things are heading. That calmness isn't confidence, it's finality. It suggests the risk has already been weighed and deemed acceptable. And that's terrifying because it means the people closest to the situation believe the current system is worse than the consequences of blowing it up. When stakeholders reach that conclusion, it's not a negotiation tactic. It's a breaking point. This isn't about winning a short-term battle. It's about deciding whether the league continues as we know it or hands its future to someone else entirely.
The WNBA could be dead. Not dead like, oh, the ratings are down dead. I'm talking about the league that just had the most successful season in its history. The league that finally got mainstream attention. The league that everybody's been waiting 28 years to see take off. That league might literally cease to exist. And the craziest part, the players are the ones that are about to pull the trigger. Because right now, as I'm recording this, WNBA players are literally one day away from potentially going.
When you go back and really study the tape, something deeply unsettling starts to surface. On the surface, the headlines tell a story of triumph, progress, and celebration. Every article, every quote, every soundbite pushes the same narrative. Success has arrived, the future is bright, and everything is finally working. But when you strip away the hype and look closely at the timing, the numbers, and the sequence of decisions, a very different picture begins to emerge. And that gap between what was said publicly and what actually happened behind the scenes speaks louder than any press release ever could. The disconnect is impossible to ignore once you see it. While the cheering grew louder, the underlying metrics stopped behaving the way success stories are supposed to behave. Instead of clean upward momentum, things started drifting sideways. Then quietly, without warning, the lights went out. No dramatic collapse, no single announcement that screamed disaster. Just a slow fade into uncertainty. That's what makes it unsettling. It doesn't feel accidental. It feels deliberate. The more you analyze it, the more one question refuses to go away. What if the celebration wasn't actually celebrating success at all? What if it was covering for a decision that had already been made? A decision locked in long before fans, players, or even parts of the media were willing to acknowledge it. The applause kept going, the optimism stayed loud, but behind the curtain, the path forward may have already been sealed. This is where the story gets uncomfortable. Because if the ending was pre-written, then all the speeches, all the smiling photo ops, and all the confident messaging weren't signs of progress. They were distractions, and the reason everything suddenly feels like it fell apart overnight is because the collapse didn't begin overnight. It was just hidden in plain sight. When people say, nobody saw this coming, what they really mean is that nobody wanted to look closely enough. The warning signs were there, but they were drowned out by excitement, momentum, and the desire to believe the good times would last forever. That belief became a shield against hard questions. Stick with this story until the end because it only truly makes sense once you accept one uncomfortable truth. By the time most people realize something was wrong, the outcome may have already been inevitable. The shock isn't that everything stopped. The shock is how long the illusion of success was allowed to run before reality finally caught up.
98% yes. You never
You're looking at roughly 98 players in the mix here.
on the same page, but if this happens, it could be the end of the WNBA as we know it. Because other leagues are popping up saying, hey, you don't like the W? Come play here. We'll pay you more.
Oh, I would let them. If I was the WNBA, I would let any players that wanted to go play in this other league play in that league, because if we couldn't make money as the WNBA, literally the WNBA, you're going to take the same players that we had and you're going to find a way to make money. I would watch and see what they do, and if it does work out, I would use their business.
The red flags were there long before anyone wanted to admit it. They were flashing like smoke alarms while someone taped a handwritten note over them saying everything was fine. About a year ago, when a few voices suggested that walking away might eventually become an option, the reaction was nervous laughter, disbelief. The idea sounded absurd. Walk away now? When the league was finally experiencing real mainstream attention that felt like unplugging life support the moment the patient opened their eyes. And yet, here we are, facing exactly what everyone swore would never happen. The irony is almost poetic in its cruelty. The league finally achieved what it had chased for decades: legitimate cultural relevance, sold-out arenas, television ratings that demanded attention, games that mattered beyond the core fan base. And just as all of it came together, the foundation began to crack. The explanation isn't complicated. It's money colliding with timing and expectations at the worst possible moment. One athlete entered the league and changed everything. Games that once blended into the background suddenly became events. Viewership didn't climb, it exploded. Regular season matchups transformed into must-watch television. Even games she didn't play benefited from the ripple effect. The league caught a level of attention it wasn't structurally prepared to handle. Championship games that once passed quietly suddenly produced numbers that forced people to stop pretending nothing had changed. Success arrived faster than the system could adapt. And now the bill for that success has come due at the exact moment when walking away feels both unthinkable and somehow inevitable.
Bro, this is getting crazy, and these people are actually delusional. I made a video a couple of days ago talking about the WNBA, and 97% of the WNBA players said that they were going to go on strike if they weren't paid what they were owed. Now, the average amount that a WNBA player makes is like $120,000 a year, which I think is good for a league that doesn't make any money. But the WNBA came to the table and said, okay, for you guys to play another season, we're willing to pay you, on average, the new wage would be $540.
This was supposed to be the moment everyone pointed to forever. The turning point. The chapter that future documentaries would reference as proof that the formula had finally been cracked. The victory lap. The stretch of time where critics would be silenced with one simple phrase. Look what happened next. That was the expectation. That was the promise. Instead, what unfolded felt strangely hollow. On the surface, the celebration continued uninterrupted. The energy stayed high. The messaging stayed confident. Everything looked right. But underneath that polished exterior, something else was happening. It was like watching a party that never stops, even as someone quietly starts stacking chairs and wiping down tables in the background. Everyone can sense something's off, but nobody wants to be the one who asks the uncomfortable question out loud. What makes this moment so bizarre is how overwhelming the apparent agreement was. This wasn't a divided room. This wasn't a narrow vote or a contentious split. This was roughly 98% alignment. You're talking about nearly the entire group, around 98 individuals, moving in the same direction. That kind of consensus doesn't usually come from impulse. It comes from build-up, and yet, publicly, the narrative suggested discovery rather than preparation, as if everyone suddenly arrived at the same conclusion at the same time. That's not how human systems work. Decisions of this magnitude don't materialize out of thin air. They form slowly through repeated conversations, growing frustrations, and moments where doubts are ignored rather than resolved. The most telling detail is how little genuine surprise there seemed to be among those closest to the situation. Shock existed on the outside, among fans and observers, but internally, reactions felt measured, controlled, almost resigned. That alone suggests this outcome had been discussed long before it ever became public. What was framed as a breakthrough moment now reads more like a transition phase, not the start of something new, but the final act of something that had already run its course. The celebration wasn't about winning, it was about closure. And that distinction changes everything. When history looks back at this chapter, it may not be remembered as the moment success arrived. It may be remembered as the moment everyone pretended success was secure while quietly preparing for something else entirely.
What are the WNBA stars actually fighting about? Well, it's simple. They're only fighting about money. And that's a way to simplify everything, but it's way more complicated than that. See, it's not just about how much the players get paid, it's about how they get paid. And this is where things get really interesting. Right now, WNBA players get about 9 to 10% of league revenue. The league's supermax salary in 2025 was $249,244. The average salary was $120,000. The minimum was just $6.
The most frightening aspect of this entire situation isn't division. It's alignment. Real division at least suggests debate, flexibility, and the possibility of compromise. But when nearly everyone agrees on a drastic course of action, that's not unity, it's a countdown. When 98% of a group moves in the same direction, it signals that the decision has already matured. Minds have been made up. Arguments have been rehearsed. Doubts have been resolved internally, even if they haven't been acknowledged publicly. This didn't appear overnight, no matter how surprised everyone claims to be. The signs were there long before the headlines caught up. People just chose not to connect the dots. It's easier to act shocked than to admit the warning signs were ignored. The calm tone surrounding this alignment is what makes it so unsettling. There's no urgency to reverse course. No frantic search for alternatives. Just acceptance. That's the behavior of a system that has already crossed a psychological threshold. Once that happens, reversing direction becomes incredibly difficult. Not because solutions don't exist, but because belief in the current structure has evaporated. And without belief, no agreement feels sufficient. This isn't solidarity in the inspirational sense. It's collective resignation. And that's far more dangerous.